brand new day today. I've checked the forecast and it's going to be really clear today. So I'm going to install a window on our sliding door here. I'm going to be installing this. It's a Motorcraft Premium Van Window. Now Motorcraft normally make windows for expedition vehicles, but they now have this van window available. The difference between this and sort of your standard bonded window is that it has double glazing for one. So that should mitigate some heat loss. And also what's different is that with normal sliding windows, of course, they slide across the side, which gives you a bit of ventilation. But of course, when it's raining, you're then going to get rain coming through. Whereas this actually opens from the bottom and tilts up, helping to sort of mitigate that. I have a few qualms about this window at the moment. One of the main ones being that it's straight sided, and of course every van is going to have a curvature to their walls. So I'm going to install this and then we'll see afterwards actually how much of a gap is present at the top and the bottom of the window and how much adhesive is needed to actually fill that gap. So first up, I'm going to take some measurements across here and across the height as well. And I'm going to transfer those over to the side door here with a felt tip pen, and then we can go ahead and cut it out. Okay, so we've got the marks out now. I know exactly where I need to be cutting out. And what we're going to do is going to take some masking tape and just run it all around the outer edge. This is just to make sure that the feet of the jigsaw don't come into contact with the paintwork and damage it. This is a brand new paint job on here, so we really don't want to jeff this one up. So now that we're all taped off, I need to drill a little point of entry for the jigsaw blade. So I've loaded up a drill bit that's designed for cutting through metal. It's slightly wider than the blade itself, so we can fit it through. It's good to put some PPE on at this point because you're going to start getting loads of little metal splinters going everywhere. So some goggles and some gloves are really handy. So as I mentioned previously, we're going to be cutting this out with a jigsaw, so it's important that we use the correct jigsaw blade. So this is the specific one that I'm going to be using, if you can see that. It's the Bosch T118A. I'll leave a link in the description for those, but they're designed specifically for cutting out metal. It's a really good idea to use a ladder. All of the weight of the jigsaw is going to be down here. Take your time when you're doing it. That way you're going to be able to follow the line correctly. You're not going to run off course. It's going to give more time for the blade to actually feed through. If you start from the bottom and work round, then what you'll find is the metal will bow out and then it will just splinter the paintwork on the bottom edge. So start from the top, work around. We're all ready to go. I'm going to put some headphones on. If you use some headphones like these are the 3M work tunes. You could pipe some classical music into your ears just to calm you down before this very stressful job. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but this is a really good quality jigsaw and you can see the marks it's made on the paintwork. So it's really important that you tape off those outer areas. Hey. There's no going back now. Cool, so I'm just going to cut these little curved edges off, make them nice and straight. I'm just going to check around the perimeter and see if there's anywhere I've come in slightly. I'll just tidy that up a bit, but then we should be ready for the next stage. So next I'm going to take a metal file to all four sides and just take off any sharp edges. Then we're going to give it all a really good hoover, make sure none of that metal debris is left behind because that will rust as time goes on. And then I'm going to take some red oxide. You could use some paint of choice that you have around already. Basically we just need to apply it to this raw metal edge just to make sure that it's not exposed to oxidation and rust. So that's had a couple of hours to dry. It's getting a little dark now, so I'm just going to do a bit of prep work and then actually install the window tomorrow. But what I'm going to do for now is just take this inside layer of painter's tape off, and then I'm going to clean it with just a sponge and some water, and then I'm going to go with a microfiber cloth like this a bit of degreaser that I'm going to spray into the cloth, and then I'm just going to wipe these edges just to make sure that any wax buildup or debris or grime is all removed, so there's really good adhesion for the window onto the surface later on. Okay, what I'm going to do now is actually take the window and just pop it in place, and then I'm just going to mask off around the outer frame. This is just so that when I push the window in later with the adhesive on, if I get any squeeze out, it's going to end up on the tape and not on the paintwork, which is going to be a real pain to clean up. Okay, so I've finished taping all of that off now. As you can see, I've got some curved edges here to follow the profile of the window. Just take some time on this bit, make sure you've got really nice clean lines. Now I'm going to tape off the actual window itself. Okay, next I'm going to start adhering this on, and I'm going to use some of this U-Pole Tiger Seal to do so. Motorcraft do make their own version as well. Unfortunately I was sent a white one instead of a black one, so I'm going to return that, and I'm using this instead, which they've also said is okay to use. So I'm going to take the nozzle off and I'm going to cut it first of all. It's just going to make it a little easier for me to put a nice thick bead on rather than this tiny end. So I'm just going to cut the end off. Now I'm just going to put a little V-notch in here. Cool, so hopefully you can see that. That'll provide a really nice thick bead that's nice and tall. So just a couple of quick tips before we load this in. If you've got a cheap corking gun like I have here, you can whack some tape around it just to make sure that the cartridge doesn't pop out as you're applying pressure on the gun. Also, I'd place the adhesive somewhere warm overnight. It's going to make it a lot easier to get out of the tube. So I'm just going to run one continuous bead all the way around. I'm going to start at the bottom. I wouldn't put your overlap at the top because then there's a likelihood that water could ingress through there. Okay, so I've almost used a whole tube of silicone in there, and I could certainly do with more at the top and bottom, so I'm just going to go around now with that just to make sure that's all finished off. Just make sure you wipe your hands if you do get any of this on your fingers. It's really easy to just sort of like lean against the van or something and put a lovely black splodge all over some nice new paintwork. Basically now just filling this to the very top, and I will go around this with my finger later to clean it up. Okay, see why it's really important to tape all of this area off, because I'm getting some excess. I'll show you when I come around this side. This would be such a pain to clean up. Now with standard bonded windows you don't have to do all of this. So it does beg the question, is this really worth it? Okay, now here comes the fun bit of trying to clean this all up to look half decent. Right, the silicone's going really hard, so I'm just going to take off this masking tape now. Because this is so on show, you've really got to spend a lot of time getting this down. I don't know how I'm going to clean this up later. It's going to be a pain in the arse, isn't it, Bethy? Also looks like a lot of the silicone's just now dropped as well down there. So you need to redo that bit too. So I'm actually now using this microfiber cloth and some of the degreaser to go around the edges, and it actually seems to be cleaning it up quite well. So I'm just going to do that all the way round. So I've tidied this all up as best as I possibly can. I think what I'm going to do is once this is actually dried off, I'm going to come around here and just have an edge that kind of tilts this way to make sure that any water is definitely going to run off and not sort of puddle across the top. So I'm going to come back maybe later today or even tomorrow, finish this off, and then we'll give a roundup of how we feel about this. So today I'm going to be installing the blind, or at least I would have hoped to have installed it. Unfortunately, I've not been having much luck with Motorcraft or Overland Monkey, who distribute their products. So the first window I had actually came damaged. It looked like it had been damaged before it had even been sent out because there was no damage to the box from the courier. Matt did come out and replace it after about 3 or 4 weeks himself. But then when I went to go and install it, the adhesive he'd given me was white instead of the black one that I'd ordered. And I've just opened up the blind to find out that this is also damaged. So yeah, a little bit frustrating at this point that nothing's being checked very thoroughly. But nevertheless, I was able to hold it up in situ and see how this was going to fit. Now, it's a little confusing because on their websites, it advertises the windows as being 55mm deep. Now, this has a 60mm protruding lip on it there, and probably another 20mm or so on the double glazed window, so probably about 80mm in total. And from what I gather, and this was the case in the first window that turned up, is that the Expedition windows come 110mm thick. Matt at Overland Monkey actually cut this down for me a little bit to that depth, and I think that's the recommendation, is that you can cut it down to the depth of the depth of your wall, basically. Now, the trouble with that is, of course, is that if you're cutting it by hand, there's certainly room for error there. And this is a £600 window. I don't particularly want to be taking a multi-tool or jigsaw or whatever you're going to use to cut down this window. And case in point is that when I checked the cut with a straight edge after it had been installed, unfortunately, I could see that Matt had waned a little bit on his cut. So the idea that they're sort of telling customers to then cut this down themselves is kind of a bit ludicrous, really, because, you know, unless it's been machined, you're not going to get a nice clean cut. So it kind of makes me think this isn't really engineered for its intended purpose. The problem we've got now is that there's only an 8mm gap when you open the sliding door between that lip and the van's wall. Now, this blind is 38mm deep. There is a 10mm rebate on here, but you still need 28mm of depth, which we just don't have. So I would have to cut this down myself, which, as I say, I don't really fancy doing. And I think what we're going to do instead, send this blind back and instead put a wooden frame around it. Another issue we've got with this blind as well is when you hold it up, there's about a 2 or 3 centimetre gap at the top and on the sides. Loads of room for it to move around, and you can actually see there's a gap on the bottom, you know, if you were to hold it down. And it just doesn't seem like this was designed to fit with the window. I don't know if this has been outsourced from a different company or something, but again, not really been engineered very well for its intended purpose. It's kind of interesting because I watched a Coombe Valley camper video of them installing this. They said they were going to do a second video installing the blind, which never came to light, so I wonder if they had the same problem. Anyway, we're going to send this blind back and I'll give you a quick roundup of this install. Okay, so let's sum up installing this window then. So one of the things that I like about this window is the fact that it opens upwards. I think this is a great feature for when it's raining, because a lot of these have like sliding door windows on that could easily allow some of the precipitation in, but this of course allows you to kind of keep it nicely ventilated even when it's raining. Another thing is it probably adds a little bit of extra security, being a double glazed window, albeit it probably is mitigated against the fact that there are a bunch of single glazed windows all around the van. Unfortunately, the cons far outweigh the pros in this window for me personally. So firstly, this was probably one of the trickiest windows I've ever installed. I've installed windows on several different vehicles, and I think it will be particularly difficult for a first timer. This gap here and at the bottom as well, where this window isn't properly engineered for its intended purpose, this curve, makes it incredibly difficult to then get that adhesive looking really clean. And of course you're going to see it, so you want it to look nice and clean and for it to be a tidy job. Now I'm going to have to actually go back around this again because the adhesive actually settled. There's now a divot at the top here where water is now going to pool, so I'm going to have to spend even more time going back around it a second time. So in terms of the amount of adhesive used, I ended up using 2 cartridges, which is quite a lot. In terms of a bonded window, I'd probably only use about half a cartridge, so you're going to have to spend more money in that sense. And that adhesive isn't included in the price, nor is delivery. So the window comes in at £600. You're going to spend another tenner on adhesive and about £40 it was on delivery. So for £650, you're basically buying a window that's not even designed or engineered to fit a van. They basically just rebadged a window that's intended for straight-sided expedition vehicles and marketed it as a van window to make some extra money, which is disappointing. So one of the big things they push in their advertising is the double glazing, which will help with thermal loss and sound insulation, but as mentioned with the security feature of this, it's going to be very quickly mitigated against by the fact that you've got huge amounts of single glazing in the front cab, so that really is going to add no benefit whatsoever to your vehicle. On an expedition vehicle, I think this would be fantastic, you know, if you've got a hell of a lot of money to burn, but in a van like this I can't see much point to it. So would I recommend this window to anyone, or would I install it again? Well, given that it was the most expensive, the trickiest to install and the worst fitting window that I've ever had to install, it would be a resounding no from me. Let me know what your thoughts are anyway in the comments. Stay tuned, we're going to be converting this VW into a camper over the next coming months, so stay tuned for that, and hopefully we'll catch you in another video soon.